Club soda. That's what I'm drinking right now.
Hello, hello. Welcome to Coalition Radio. I am Brother Muggs.
And I am Zane Wolfang.
This is the Give and Take. How's it going?
Episode
7.
7.
Lucky number 7.
I never remember, even though it's always just the next number.
Yeah, you know. Keep track of these things. Welcome, everybody. How's it going? We have an exciting episode for you guys today.
First and foremost, Brother Muggs is on screen.
Yeah, that's as exciting as it's gonna get. No, this is the first time I've been on screen and show my likeness and whatnot. Unfortunately, we live in a world where our government likes to hunt people down by using private information. So unfortunately, we have to go to these measures to protect ourselves. So here we are.
Muggs, who else do we have in the studio with us today?
Today,
special guest,
our friend. He. What handle would you like to go by?
I say don't over-introduce him. Jeez.
Yeah. My man Jay. My man Jay in the building over here.
He was smoking some fish, but we convinced him to join us for a quick conversation.
You know what I mean?
Do you have a timer? You have a timer on the smoker?
Yeah, I got a mental one, man. I might have to bounce in and out, but glad to be here, my friends, and chime in when I can.
Absolutely.
Muggs, tell us a little bit about the topic of your show today.
The topic of the show today is the arts.
The
arts. We live in the creative capital, of course,
quote unquote.
The Renaissance city, as I like to call it, as it once was called. But it's been changed to the creative capital some years ago. And we want to talk today about how city politics ties into money, ties into art.
Let's start though with just like the raw, with the art, with like the art scene in Providence, because I think that's a good reason to let Jay sort of is why Jay is here with us as well, right? Besides just smoking fish.
Yeah, my man. To start, this mask was made by a local artist, My Cultura. Check him out, Instagram, whatever. He's got all sorts of masks, T-shirts.
What's his name? Say it again.
My Cultura.
Like Spanish
for culture.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
We
get those terrifying COVID masks.
Yeah.
From My Cultura.
Holler.
This looks like a Korean mask.
Yeah, this has like some definite like Asian roots to it, but there was another one that was like Predator. Another one that was, you know what I mean? So they had all sorts of ones. But he has great stuff. Local artists of color, go support. So yeah, roll right into it. There was a mural painted on Harris Avenue about 2 weeks ago.
Tell people where Harris Ave is.
Harris Ave is located just east of Olneyville, in between Eagle Square and Olneyville Square.
Go to Eagle Square, get your compass out.
Yeah, you wanted a GPS. I wanted people to know Harris Ave. That's good enough. They know where it is. If you're not from here, get familiar. We got cell phones. But no, so a mural was painted very bluntly above the actual artwork in black lettering says, "Black people are still being lynched in America." Underneath are the names of Crispus Attucks, Emmett Till, Martin Luther King Jr., Breonna Taylor. It stuck with the Black Revolutionary color theme of black, red, and green. The background is white just to like make everything pop out. I was very fortunate to help with this project.
And there's some human figures in between the names, correct?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the characters were slave overseer with his whip extended above his head. in that same pose was an officer of, mid 1900s, 1950s, 1940s. We snuck in a little Hitler stash, just so heads knew the deal. In the same exact pose, and then another
arm
one
raised above the head, as if to strike down
with a weapon.
Right. So for the overseer with the whip, arm raised to strike down, parallel position.
Exactly.
The cop. And then there was a third and a fourth.
Yes.
Or just three.
There was a third. The third is an officer of modern times with riot gear and police across his shield, and also with a weapon raised above his head, a nightstick.
Right. It's sorry to jump in. I think it's really interesting. I went to see the mural sort of as it was being painted, which was a really cool experience for me. I'm not an artist. My understanding, right, is that both Muggs and Jay, you worked on this mural project personally, right? Had some input into the creative process of this mural, which is and so this is what I want to say to these guys who actually worked on this. Right now, we just got off the phone with Pat Ford, the head of Coalition Radio, who's usually on the show with us, and he's in downtown Providence right now. I don't know enough to comment really, but I know there was like a defend, not defund rally planned for people who are supporting the police and are against defunding the police and think the police are being maligned by the current social movement, right? And then in turn, there were some counter protesters sort of like denouncing their stance, right?
Yeah.
And Pat called us, or I called Pat to see, what was up with the show and get ready. And he's downtown and the area around, he said the police station, I think he means the public safety complex, rather than one of the substations, that the neighborhood is kind of sealed off and it's very tense and it's getting very ugly. And that's the quote that I heard from him. In any case, I think
Breaking news. Pat Ford on the ground. I see you.
And I will say, Pat Ford is always on the ground. Anyway, circling back to you guys finished this mural. Black people are still being lynched in America today, right? That's what it.
No, it was finished. It was finished last week, but
last week, and now this week, right? And you have the riot police guy up there. Now
yes.
This week, there's like this recurring standoff with the riot police.
Only a few blocks away.
Only a few blocks away. But Jay, maybe can you talk to us a little bit about more broadly, like the group coming together to make this mural, how the idea came about? And Muggs, I'm sure you can jump in on this too. My understanding is that there's sort of a graffiti style to this mural, right? Like a very
100%,
modern style.
100%.
Can you maybe talk about the scene that gave birth to this very powerful piece of art on Harris Ave?
Jay, you can definitely speak on that.
Well, I mean, we all started out as kids, the love for art and ambition to get out there and put our names up. And a lot of that, I think.
How young?
Can be. I probably started writing on things when I was like 12 years old.
Yeah,
so
12, 13 years old.
Like pretty young, not to the extent that, in my later years I went out and did things, but it all starts somewhere. But I think a lot of graffiti writers are egotistical, like.
It's dogs pissing on trees.
Yeah.
That's the only way I can describe it, is dogs pissing on trees. But you know what? Everyone loves dogs. So we're good.
Well, I think what's interesting.
My dogs are my dogs.
Yeah, for real.
I think what's interesting too, right, is I know, right, like Providence had a graffiti task force for a while. I remember the Vans.
Headed by Nicole Darling of District 9.
Wow, you guys seem to have some personal knowledge of the matter.
Of course.
But the graffiti task force. But Jay, my understanding is that you create art in a variety of other media as well, ongoing in your life, right? So can you talk maybe both of you guys about sort of perceptions of like graffiti and it being a crime or it being defacing of buildings versus the reality maybe that quite a few graffiti writers are also creative drivers in other art scenes in the city? Or in there.
Do you want to take this one?
I think initially some of the things that attracted me to graffiti were going out there and destroying things, writing on things, getting my name up there, getting recognition, Some of the other things that came along with that are understanding of color, understanding of, you know, fine quality, characters, doing representational art, understanding
Honor.
different sorts of mediums, honor,
Respect.
never ratting.
Never rat. Respect.
There's a multitude of positive things that have come out from me, you know, quote unquote, just writing on people's shit. And that has propelled me to do.
I think the beautiful part of all this is that, like, the latest movement that we've seen in the United States has come with a few conversations, one of which being, you know, fuck people's property, you know, people over property. And it's great that I've had this mindset since I was a very young kid. I've always thought people over property. I would rather someone drive by a building and see my expression all over it than go by it and be bored or never see it. You
If
know
somebody
what I mean?
tagged across like your wall and front door, would you be heated? Or would you be like, I respect that because of the statement I just made about?
Well, no, now because I'm in that subculture, I have to deal with that. You know what I mean? That's something where it's just like, okay, you've now stepped on my toes, and because I'm in this subculture, I got to deal with it. If you're not a part of it and it happens to you, you know, deal with it. You know what I mean? That's on
Right.
you.
Although I will say too, I feel like it's not common. Well, I mean, I guess if people live in like old mills or like industrial sized buildings,
and that comes with the honor and respect too. People don't hit people's doors. Like,
I would say people don't tag people's houses. You don't see like an old wooden house in Providence that someone like tagged with big bubble letters on the side.
Yeah, no, there's that comes with the honor and respect.
You might see it on an abandoned house.
Older heads, you know, at least back in our day, would give you a slap if they saw that you did that. You know what I mean? Because you want some of that recognition from your peers. So if you want that recognition and you throw your shit up on a stupid spot, best believe you're going to hear about it that night. You know what I mean? It's
Both of you have mentioned recognition as a big part of an up-and-coming graffiti writer's sort of like motivation. What does that mean?
It's an umbrella term, though.
Is it like notoriety, or is it like respect? You went to a ballsy place to do this, or
there's
like
part of it, but like, Jay, what would you say?
Is it about like artistic skill?
It's about placement. It's definitely about art placement. If you can place it somewhere nice and do a good job at that,
you need to do both.
You have to do both.
You can't go to a great spot and write something crappy.
Shit. Yeah.
I could rifle off a bunch of names of people in the city currently that are doing great spots and doing a lot of work that I don't particularly care for their graffiti. Do I like hate on that fully? No. I like their work ethic and, you know, their drive to go out there and paint. I can't hate on that at all. Do I like seeing it in the streets? Fuck no.
Yeah, I'd rather see dope people doing stuff than a bunch of whack people. But as part of someone who is now aging in the culture, I also fucking love seeing it. I just like seeing
new writers.
Yeah, I don't care how good they are.
Would you assume that if the writing is bad but the location placement is good, that the person is new, or is it possible that the person is just bad and continues to write? You know what I mean?
Both of those possibilities.
But
both of those things.
Usually, if they're bad and they continue to write, you're gonna know who that is. You know,
you're gonna meet them eventually.
Oh, it's that dude that has been doing terrible graffiti for 20 years. You know what I mean? And like whatever. If that makes them happy, if they get out of bed in the morning and they're excited to live life because they can go out there and paint, like, I don't have to like it, but you know, that's them. They're doing that.
If I can steer this back towards like
Providence, like
just towards Providence, just because, you know, you asked about you know, how it is affected, you know, in Providence, the scene here in Providence.
This was very informative for me too.
And the scene, we're breaking it down for all the listeners in studio and in the world.
Yeah.
Our millions of listeners out there. We appreciate y'all.
Yeah, you guys know, out in South County.
Yeah. But no, seriously, I think that here in Providence especially, graffiti, which was once, like you said, had a task force. You know, the mayor had a van driving around to do anti-graffiti and literally, like, you know, brush everyone's shit and buff everyone's stuff, is now using graffiti to sell its image of this creative capital. And I don't think the image of, train workers shooting rubber bullets at children, or cops busting some kid's head open because he caught a tag somewhere is what's going to sell that image. No, they need Shepherd Ferry. They need outsourced workers and artists.
There's been a number of big murals that have gone
Huge
up downtown,
murals, all of which have been paid out of maybe $5,000 or more for some of these.
Way more.
Way more. That's just a very modest quote.
The orange P for the creative cap. I remember the logo. It was like a public call out for soliciting designs for that, what became just like that very, that orange
and
P.
I don't know who did the orange P.
It was like 50,000. It was a large amount of money.
I don't know who did the orange P.
I think 50,000 is a lot of money.
I do too.
Yeah.
That's a come up, especially for an
artist.
P, yeah. But I don't know who did that. But I do know that a lot of the work is being outsourced through a company here in Providence. Now, this company, known as the Avenue Concept,
is a Rhode Island,
or the Avenue Paint Bar, whatever they have gone by now.
It's a Rhode Island company.
It's a Providence-based company on the south side, right off of Broad Street, across from the classical football field. Open walls for artists to come through, paint, do what they have to do, rock some walls.
That's cool.
Buy some paint. Sounds cool, right? It sounds like a good place to go hang out. You know what I mean?
It does.
However, there are local artists who have gone there, brought up the notoriety of this building by doing beautiful murals on the outside. And the people on the inside are having meetings about getting people from out of state to come here and rock murals for lots of money. Now, are there local artists who've gotten bread to do murals? Absolutely. Not enough. I don't think a place that calls itself the creative capital should outsource artists at all.
Right. Also, I feel Rhode Island in general tends to be a place where people are proud to buy local, where you find more like independently owned things still, because of, it's a million strong population in this small place and people don't like to leave. So, like there are, if you look at restaurants, diners, you know what I mean? Like you go to other parts of the countries and like in Denny's, it's all you're going to get. You know what I mean? Like there's all kinds of mom and pop places around here. So it's sad that from what you're saying, it seems that the state is not like supporting local artists enough.
There are people who definitely will reach out and say, hey, give us a call, send us an email, and talk to us about what mural you want done. What do you want to be seen done? But even that, unfortunately, is not enough. I loved the free space that was given to artists, especially artists of color, after Breonna Taylor's, after George Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor's murder. There was free space opened up across like 4 or 5 city blocks here in Providence. One was on the outskirts, right next to the school department. But that was also a cool wall because people could literally just walk up and do a mural to express how they felt about the times. Sounds beautiful.
It does. It sounds nice.
But there are lots of businesses who were like, hey, I'm going to board up my business because I don't want to be looted and whatnot, but I need to show solidarity at the same time. How do I do that? Oh, I'm going to use a black artist as a backdrop to protect my business.
Do you think it was cynical?
I do. That's just how I am.
Would you, if you owned a business and you thought people were going to riot and break all the glass in the neighborhood, would you board it up?
No.
Or would you eat that cost out of solidarity?
No, I would be there the night that I thought that they were going to riot and pass out.
I know a guy whose store got trashed on the night of the riots. He owns a store right downtown. Indian American guy.
I only refer to the riots as the riots because that's what they were, and I love that, and I own that term. I'm not against it. That is what they were, and that's the only word that seems to incite change. So during these riots, if I owned a business downtown, I would have been out there like the owner of North, passing out medical equipment. I wouldn't have been out there boarding up my window and having some black artists paint a fist on it So
Yeah,
I felt
and that's-
safe at night.
That's dope. I like you know, you don't assume cynicism as the ulterior motive of the people, and I don't either. I don't know the people of North, but I do know that they've been habitually open and responsive and like proactive in these demonstrations. So I don't want anyone to feel like I'm throwing shit at North in any way. I'm just saying, you were saying like if you board up but you let Black artists or protesters express themselves artistically on your boards, that's a cop out. But what if, like, I don't think that North was being cynical when they were handing stuff out.
I
But
love
why,
that. No,
yeah, but
I
so
love
why?
it.
But so why do the people boarding up have to be cynical? Or do you think they're just like they shouldn't be so afraid? Like, do you think that the fear, like not overcoming their fear, is problematic?
Boarding up doesn't show true solidarity.
Doesn't show trust. So
It doesn't show trust. You can't say, "Hey, I'm with you. My fist is raised right along with you. I understand your rage," and then be like, "Oh, but I'm also terrified of it." No, my man's was out there with medical equipment, water, a tent, masks, gloves, anything for supporting this rage.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think what
that was the right thing to
noble. Do. I don't know. Like I think that I'm understanding of some people.
But Jay,
boarding up as
you feel me though. Like I feel like the city now uses artists. You know what I mean? Like the same artists that they were locking up, not 5 years ago, not 2 years ago.
Were people getting picked up for writing and getting picked up in a cruiser? Like people getting locked up.
Always had. That's always been the norm.
Does that happen to you?
It's come back into pop culture as a very popular thing, and whoever wants to use it in whatever way and appropriate it has been doing that.
Yeah, I think companies like Echo, yep.
The city, you mean specifically?
The city of Providence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys know about the mural? It's like an indigenous woman with flowers around her,
painted by a man from New York.
That was my question, as if you knew where
painted
the
by a man from New York who gave a speech at RISD about 2 months before COVID hit, and I really wanted to go and just thrash everything about this, but that would just show too much caring and give him notoriety he doesn't deserve. I think that the piece was beautiful. I'm not going to sit here and say it's ugly. It is an eyesore. Like, that would just be stupid. I think it's a beautiful piece that highlights people who are definitely marginalized and looked over here in this country as a whole, here in this state specifically.
Yeah, I mean, we're
on native land right now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Like,
we're on native land.
The earliest. One of the earliest intrusions upon native land.
Yes, absolutely, and I love the piece itself, but that man had no right, no business doing that piece here, and it wasn't on him. It was pushed through by the Avenue concept. The city now, I have, I wish I had articles and whatnot to show you, but it's not. This isn't a matter of opinion. This is fact. The city and the state look to the Avenue concept for artistic. So there was a project called Move, where they wanted to like spruce up city buses. So they got these big, these big things to wrap.
I've seen at least one.
And they wrapped
funky.
the Ripta bus in this thing. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. It looks good. That's aesthetically nice to look at. Who made it?
Yeah, that's like a question I wouldn't think to ask as someone who's not an artist personally. You know what I mean? But I think
the art scene is crazy. People need to make money.
My question was going to be, do you think that like state art projects should be bid out exclusively to Rhode Island-based artists? But then I also thought about the Avenue concept really sort of functions as like a workaround of that because it's a Rhode Island-based company. So if you contract them and they sub somebody from out of state, the state government has, even if you make a contractual obligation that it has to be a Rhode Island business, you know what I mean? Like, but do you think it would be better to go a step further and say it must be a Rhode Island-based artist who's actually doing the work?
I think for certain projects in certain locations, it should be done by a Rhode Island artist. To say that I think everything should be done in the state by a Rhode Island artist, I don't necessarily adhere to that. But that being said, I would like to see more projects go to local people that
Right, like
have
let's
talent,
let's
you know?
shrink it down. Like City of Providence funded art projects. Do you think that those should be
I think
done by
there's-
Providence residents?
If money's going towards it, like, because there's lots of open
or
wall projects that
bid
have
out
happened.
for a period of time
Especially
first.
if taxpayers' money is going into it, I think local people that pay taxes and are here in the community should get first dibs, especially if they're confident and their artwork quality is like comparable to.
Who decides that?
Contenders, you
That's
know what
the
I mean?
problem, is that we
But-
allow these culture vultures to come in with their money, and they run these projects, these
Right. Well, there's also this double-edged sword called the Rhode Island School of Design, right? Because on the one hand, you can boast some like artistic cachet to Providence and say like it's absurd that a City of Providence art project should go to someone from outside Providence when you have one of the best art schools in the world here. But at the same time, a lot of the RISD artists, a lot of RISD people stay, I'm sure. Quite a few
too
do not.
many.
Quite a few do not. Quite a few do not. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think like
RISD
RISD.
alumni, but
To answer your
yeah,
question,
facts.
yes,
Yeah.
100%. Providence projects should go to Providence residents, and if you're not from here, you can't fucking pay.
So what if you went to RISD and you stayed? Should you be eligible for these things? I personally think that to say that RISD doesn't offer any like some significant positive artistic drive to this city would be foolish. I think that
I
you, know,
would
you say
never,
too many
no.
stay, but you guys work in the creative fields to some extent. Do you know RISD grads who do cool shit?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So there is that, right? There's
I have
that
a family
reality.
member that's a RISD grad.
Yeah. I know.
Will I continue to keep it real on how RISD has negatively impacted Providence and Rhode Island as a whole? Absolutely.
You think overall negative?
100%. I think
Mostly-
most real
mostly,
local
yeah.
artists feel that way, because if you go to one of these galleries, you know, in any other city I've been to for art purposes, Baltimore, Chicago, Honolulu, any place that I've dealt with, percentages are down to like 10, 20%. It's a little more difficult to get into these galleries because they're more choosy, but I would rather that than them being like, okay, yeah, you can get an art show. We want 50%. They're taking half of people's stuff, and a lot of these RISD kids can afford to wait 3, 4, 5 months for a piece to sell. But they're
Right.
getting some of them are getting like 50 racks for their pieces
When it sells.
when it sells.
And you think that's because of the RISD
The
network?
prestige RISD
Because
network.
okay.
It would be nice to get some of that bread. It's crazy that the city blocks out local artists. It's crazy that the state blocks out local artists. It's crazy that RISD blocks out local artists.
Right. Well, what I was going to ask too is like, so there's this sort of right, maybe like commonly accepted thing, maybe more by people like me who grew up in the suburbs, that some of these marquee institutions such as Brown and Rhode Island School of Design are like overall are like net positives for the city of Providence, you know, in this specific instance, or for like a city in general. Like Ivy League school equals good for city. Like, you know, and the reality is that like Ivy League school to a large extent equals gentrification, and that's, you know, sort of perceived as good, right? Like I was just going on about there must be positive creative drivers to RISD, whereas you guys who actually grew up in Providence are saying, yeah, but overall I think it's sort of a drain on the city and resources don't go.
Providence used to be an artsy city without RISD's prestige, which is great. That's what gave us our charm. It's my favorite word to use when describing Providence, because that's what people used to say about it. You guys have a charm about you. There are so many people who I would see selling art in the streets, sitting on their asses and being like, yeah, I didn't go to RISD, but I have this beautiful piece here for $10.
I wouldn't say I've seen that so much. I mean, I wasn't coming to Providence really right until I started going to LaSalle in 7th grade. And then even still, like, you know, as I got into high school, was spending more time in the city. And then I went to Rhode Island College and lived in Providence, you know, and really got to know it. I wouldn't say that I saw a lot of people selling art out on the streets.
I did. I was a skater. They were everywhere. You know what I mean? We were just like an artsy place. There were sculptures being put up, even under the administration of Buddy Cianci, who was not the most progressive when it came to public art, was all about making downtown like beautiful with art. And so that's kind of where it started. And like they'd be like, okay, like who can we get to do this? Some weirdo from Lincoln who builds these murals in his garage and whatnot. I mean, who builds these
like sculptures
and whatnot
statues.
in his garage. Like, let's put that up in downtown, and you can still go down to the monument across the street from the Supreme Court and see the Tower of Guns, which was made by a guy here in Rhode Island, not a RISD graduate, and it's still one of my favorite, you know, things in the city to look at. But no, these money projects are going to too many New Yorkers, too many guys from Boston.
The other, like one positive thing that that I sort of associate with the creative capital, and that I like one of my mini conspiracy theories that I helped to start this event when I was volunteering for Jorge Elorza's mayoral campaign back in the day, and I pitched at a policy meeting the idea to have like a big sort of like open air market festival with local artists and bands and stuff, since PVD was a creative capital. I ended up taking a paid job with this woman running in District 4, and it was all a disaster. I left, worked on the cruise ship for a year, moved to the occupied West Bank of Palestine, the whole nine, sort of moved away from Rhode Island politics. While I was away, this thing called PVD Fest was created under the Elorza administration, which seems to have been a smashing success as far as I can tell, and looks super fun. I've never been to a PVD Fest. I wonder, like, I think you've been at least as like as a spectator and general like casual drinker in the streets. So I'm wondering if
what would make you assume that?
So I'm wondering if you could talk to me like about maybe the intersection of the city government or politics and art, like your perceptions of things like PVD Fests or Prunk.
There's some positives from PVD Fest I can definitely take away.
I know, like, your tone of voice right now is sad, but I know, like, at least once at Prunk.
That's I'm pulling it out. I'm really digging for it.
I've seen you have a lot of fun at Prunk, so I know this is some retrospect.
Well, that was before Prunk was controlled. When Prunk was just a spontaneous groups of different bighorn bands meeting under a bridge to
pause. At that same meeting I was just talking about, there was a guy there who helped plan Prunk and make it a real thing. So like there was always some like permitting and backing. It was never like they didn't like march out of the seat with their tubas and just like start grooving.
But then what happened to it last year when they couldn't even go under the bridge anymore? The bridge had the best acoustics. There was no one
over by Hot Club.
Over by Hot Club. I don't think there was any really control to it. The first Prunk, bro, it seemed like a very just. It
was like spontaneous, or I mean, like the brass people, the high school band people who kept playing after high school, all secretly planned this awesome thing, and like
they practice over there all the time.
There's that little group that
practices all the time over there. Yeah, I'm sure they just called their other big band brothers and be like, "Yo, like let's get to it."
What was AS220 Fest used to be a little thing over on Empire Street, right? That was I went on like a high school date, and that was the first time I saw Cheer Brigade was at AS220.
The Thayer Street Art Festival. They used to shut down Thayer Street, and you could go up and down and get in. And like that is what made the city the city. Now, I mean, with COVID here, we're not having any festivals, so I don't know why I'm getting all upset about it. But PVD Fest, I will say,
COVID
was cool.
Festival 2020.
Yeah, COVID Fest 2020.
Yeah, stay home.
Yeah, PVD Fest was cool. It had its own little thing. I stumbled upon it the first time, so that was fun.
That is the nice thing about Providence. It's like small and walkable enough, and people are not plugged in enough that there can be like a water fire or like a full-on festival or like gay pride going on, and you're just like, cool, the streets are shut down. Like, let me just linger.
And it was a good thing. This was a little hectic last year at PVD Fest.
There were shots fired.
There were shots fired.
I was about 10 feet away from that.
My experience at PVD Fest last year was like 10-second clips on Instagram stories from Iraq. So,
Yeah, people freaking out here about a few gunshots, and you're in Iraq.
Well, they were really, it was the only time like really projectiles were involved in my life in Iraq was when we thought that Iran was going to shoot missiles at Erbil,
Yeah.
but they didn't even explode.
Yeah.
Suckers.
Still, close call. You know?
Yeah, but I wasn't. The point being, I wasn't hearing shots on a daily basis. I would hear shit like, shots fired at PVD Fest, and be like at Erbil at the bar drinking a beer for $1.
But
being
the
like, I
vibe
feel
was
safe.
the vibe was cool that day. I will say, people were even saying, like, I would hear whispers going past crowds like, "This is great. I didn't think we could get all these people together. Nothing happens." And fast forward to a couple hours later, and something happened. But up until that point, the vibes were beautiful. It was a great time. I had a blast.
Honestly, man, like I was literally like 10, 15 feet away from that whole situation that popped off.
Talk us through that. What happened there?
Basically, I saw an altercation. Some people had knives, whatever. We were trying to move away from it.
Good move.
Someone took out a gun, fired it in the air. I really wasn't worried because it wasn't a white person with an automatic weapon.
That was facts.
I was like, this dude shot a couple rounds in the air, and everyone's running like crazy and like stepping over each other. I wasn't like in full panic mode, but I was like, all right, let me like step away from here. But I was walking, and everyone else was running. I was like, is there something wrong with me, or am I just like kind of more aware of the situation? I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I should have been running. Maybe I shouldn't have been so sure.
I think that probably varying levels of sobriety in the crowd as well would like indicate different emotional responses.
I honestly just wasn't that worried about it.
For sure. Definitely varying.
Right?
sobriety.
Like after a few beers, you might be like, this isn't a big deal.
Yeah.
And the next day be like, yeah, that was kind of fucked up.
Yeah, that was a little scary.
Regarding those shots fired in the air, I don't condone it. I think it's an unsafe practice to fire weapons randomly in the air. I'm going to go out and say that. I don't care what you think here at Coalition Radio.
What's going on?
I know some of you guys shoot guns in the air. It's cool. If you have a lot of land. But the woman I was subletting with in Iraq when I left my teaching job and started doing the journalism stuff was a woman in her early 30s from Germany, Lisa, a great lady, sublet me a room for a super cheap price. And she taught at this private German school, some quite wealthy kids from different countries, but mostly Kurdish kids in northern Iraq. And she had a picture of this kid. It was like a wedding or a birthday of some type. And he was maybe like 12. And he was like at the top of this ornate staircase. And he was posing with like an AK-47. And they just like for celebration, sometimes you fire off a couple rounds, get a little, and I've been in other countries, like in parts of Lebanon, big families do that sometimes at weddings or like big elections in different countries. So like, it's definitely super unsafe, but there are worse things than shots fired in the air in my eyes. Having been to a few places,
that didn't break up the night either. People were still,
Also, to add on to that, I think his intentions were to break up whatever dispute without having to like shoot someone.
Right, he brought a gun to a knife fight.
Or like the dude decided to shoot shots into the air rather than to try and aim for someone in their life. So,
a warning shot.
I'm not condoning what he did, but at the same time, it's like,
you don't think he was like a vigilante? He was kind of like, all right, enough.
No.
Enough.
No, definitely not.
He was like, I'm ready to escalate.
He wasn't there for the arts. I'll tell you that much. You know what I mean?
But
that's what brought us here. That's what brought us here. Was the arts here problems?
Good, nice. That was good.
I don't think anyone can answer right now. Like, I don't know. Like, who knows? Whatever. But him doing that could have saved someone's life in the grand scheme of things. You know what I mean?
Right. It was definitely
things could have escalated.
It was like one of those wild situations where no one was hurt, and then you like, right? Well, I think we know no one was hurt, right?
No one was hurt.
Okay, yeah, that's good. And
people were stepped on, minor injuries.
Yeah, some panic, but it's cool that the night was able to continue.
The night kind of continued. What
was? I know in like PVD Fest's past, there have been some visual or like performing arts in terms of like the acrobats on the side of the building. Is there like a visual arts or painting component to like? And I know like at Gay Pride too, there are some booths set up sometimes where people sell things. Are like the painting and visual arts and drawing, like, is that a part of PVD Fest? Or people selling?
There's like over by the skate park, there was like one little tiny wall set up for heads to go over and catch tags. Nothing crazy. I was actually there with, I was there with another friend over at PVD Fest, and we commented on the fact that I was like, yo, this whole street should be lined with walls. Head should be over here paint like this is Providence. You know what I mean? There was a festival in Fall River back in the day called Third Eye Blind, and it was Third Eye Open. My bad, Third Eye Blind. Listen to me. That was a band.
That was the first concert
That
I
was
ever
a
went
band.
to.
Yeah. Third Eye Open.
That's where you guys meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Third eye open, third eye blind.
Third Eye Open.
I do.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Third Eye Open was like big walls, all these breakdancing competitions. It was just hip hop, all the elements of hip hop in one. And it was dope to see, and it was like, that's the vibe I like. That's what Providence is about, you know what I mean? And unfortunately, I just feel like the arts have become more of like a carrot on the end of a string for rich people to come and buy property here. Artists aren't really taken care of here. Artists aren't really looked after here by the city or the state. You know, even with these new COVID stimulus packages coming out, they're like, oh, this will go towards the arts. Well, what does that mean? Where does it? I don't know anyone who got any money off of that. Do you know anyone, Jay, who got money off of that? I don't even think the city of Providence has received money for that.
Probably, I think a lot of times when money goes to the arts, it goes to like foundations who might further disperse funds, or it goes to museums. It goes to institutions.
Understandable,
right?
understandable. But if we can gather the people, if we can gather young Black artists to protect storefronts, why can't we gather them to give them some money? Why can't we gather them to give them some money to do what they love? You know what I mean? I know it's all about the passion and that's really why people continue to do art. But at the end of the day, heads got to survive. People need bread.
I'm gonna throw a semantical thing at you right now, just because I think that a bunch of listeners are gonna go right down that road. Like the phrase, like "give them some money." I think a bunch of certain demographics are immediately gonna be like, "That's the problem with America. They just want to be given some." You know what I mean? So
artists. It may seem fun. Art may seem simple, may seem easy. It's still work. At the end of the day,
it's
you're
also
doing
not easy. Maybe it's for you, but like,
still,
how about we don't?
Like it's a lot of work.
Hit me, Jay.
How about we don't give any projects to RISD students that are here from out of state, and give them to people that are from here.
It's just like building contracts. Why people who unions who complain about not getting enough money? It's not about them getting people throwing them dollars. It's about we need contracts. We need jobs.
Like demanding a certain percentage of the work, right? So now give us opportunity.
Oh yeah, that's what it is. I'm not saying hand them dollars for no work, but like give us these jobs. This place is filled with artists from every neighborhood.
Are there a lot of I don't think I've ever been to an art gallery in Providence. I'm sure I've been to a few in like Bristol and Warren, there's small one, which is also at
there's several.
You've had stuff hung up in Warren.
I've had stuff hung up in Warren, Providence, all the other cities I've talked about. But like here in Providence, there's one on a hill that I'll just use as an example. Nothing against them, by the way. I think they're great. Is Z Gallery. Z Gallery followed suit with the trend of 50%. You do some work, you have to, put a price on it. You do work, and it's tough to put a price on it. But when you put a price on something and then they're like, hey, whatever that number is, we're taking half of it. Just means that whatever you have to now charge
to jack up your price
a lot. And if you're gonna live off your artwork,
it's not gonna move.
50% is not good enough. So there was a gallery that opened in Olneyville called Public, not Private. It's a public gallery. They need to make money too, so they charge a 30% fee. 30 is still a little high, but way better than 50. And it's Black owned, but they got shut down because of COVID and looking for a new location now. Make sure you give them a look. Public, not private.
They have a website?
They have an Instagram.
Cool.
Check that out. They do great work. They're trying to get a new spot. Donate to them. They have a fundraiser going right now. peep that.
I also know that some people in Providence have experimented with selling their things directly over the internet.
Oh yeah.
If you want to talk about peace or any of that.
I sell my stuff on the internet. I'm not gonna tell you what it is. You know what I mean? I'm a very private guy, but
So they say.
you couldn't tell. But no, 1 second. I'm a little parched. With the creation of the internet, since the boom of like technology and smartphones and things like that, people want to decorate their house at the push of a button. And Etsy made it pretty easy. Amazon has a lot of stuff that you can just little knickknacks to throw on the wall. But Instagram has been a driving force for people to start businesses. Very rarely were people motivated to go to GoDaddy and start a website. It's a boring, long process that usually doesn't yield much result. But when you have that GoDaddy website and an Instagram that people can just scroll through, hit a link, buy your stuff, and have it at their doorstep in a few days,
right?
That changed the game. And that's pretty much the only leverage I feel not sponsored, but an artist who's not really super prominent.
Right. Even I don't know a lot about art, but I follow poetry, and it's like a lot of the working poets who are doing great are like the elites. Not like even like socioeconomic elites. I'd say poetry is a particularly inclusive, like they make a strong effort to like be the wokest almost. You know what I mean?
Zane Wolfang, everybody. While y'all are following football and basketball, he's following poetry. Get your mind right. Get your mind right.
But a lot of these people are funded by grants. They apply for institutional funding, or particularly people who are either masters or PhD students or masters of fine arts students who are then receiving, getting funded to go to school. Like they're getting institutional funding in order to be a working creative as a poet. And then they publish poetry books, and they do readings, and they sell books as well. And like there's probably a few that are, but I don't think that anyone is like, living next door to wherever the hell Jeff Bezos lives off of their poetry book sales from 2019. I just don't think that that's possible.
For the artists that I know, the ones that are even making decent money, ones that are doing okay, they've had to scratch and crawl their way to get there. They've had to do everything they can to bring in customers, especially during economic downturns where people aren't really they don't have expendable cash to buy artwork like that. And they're still pushing through. They're still getting it through. I think artists are the only reason this country has somewhat healed a little bit after George Floyd's murder. You know what I mean? All the murals that came across the city, all the Black Lives Matter road murals that people were doing. I think artists have proven themselves essential. And we're not being treated that way. That's all.
That's all.
That is all. Good night and good luck.
I'll give you $1 if you can tell me who you just quoted.
Bro, don't ever play me again in your life.
How about just stop snitching and also good luck.
Jay is back in the studio.
Jay is back in the studio. All fired up,
coming
too.
With a strong... Yeah, his tone is relaxed, but his message is fierce.
Yes.
Stop snitching.
Please stop snitching.
Don't do it. Don't do it to your
That's
friends.
actually not a bad point, to be real with you. Stop calling police on people, especially black people. If you have an issue with someone, say something. Go out there, complain. Do what you got to do. Stop calling police. Cut that out.
I really do wonder what's happening right now with
Knock it off!
Thanks, Jay. Go check on that fish. I do wonder what's happening right now with
I'm very interested in
defend, not defund.
Yes.
With the name, which can't lie to you, it's a little clever. That's a good name.
It's not difficult. Sometimes when I say defund, like I read that on people's shirt, the defund the police. I'm like, did they say defend? And it's like, oh no.
And it's only one vowel, but you know what? Like, they could have done worse. It's a good name. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying I agree with them.
No, I didn't say that.
Defend, not defund. I remembered it. You know?
Oh man, they're a funny group of people. I feel like pictures I saw from the Boston Blue Lives Matter rally or Defend the Police rally, which took place like 3 or 4 weeks ago, had more of like an undertone of like anti-Semitism. There were guys with SS flags and Nazi flags. The white nationalists were out.
A very ignored part of, you know, and I get it because we're really focusing on Black Lives Matter, right? Like from the very beginning of like just like very brazen white nationalism, like from the Trump campaign onwards to him actually like defying reality and becoming the president. Like they have really been very hard on people of Jewish faith and culture. Like they were chanting in Charlottesville, "Jews will not replace us." Like there has, the synagogue attack in Pittsburgh. I think it is worth mentioning even at this juncture while we continue to focus on Black Lives Matter. And I think it's important for me to mention as someone who's like a pretty vocal pro-Palestinian rights activist that I absolutely believe anti-Semitism is on the rise in the United States.
100%.
People are weirdly unsympathetic to Jewish people about that reality. Right. And like as someone who I am very frustrated when things like BDS, boycott, divestment and sanctions of like, let's say, Israel or specifically the settlements. Right. Or people who take policy stances against the Israeli government are labeled as anti-Semitic for doing so. That's maddening to me because that's not anti-Semitism to hold stances about the treatment of human beings by a government.
I mean, I've spoken recently to a Jewish woman about how it's maddening to her that people automatically assume she supports Israel.
Right, and many of the most vocal and most effective and most courageous pro-Palestine activists coming out of the United States, at least coming out of Israel, are Jewish people, right? Yeah. Who are having that conversation with their own people. But like finishing that thought before I just completely forget it, like setting that, people who point to BDS as a symbol of rising anti-Semitism, I think that's off base. People who point to an uncomfortable Venn diagram between BDS and actual anti-Semitism, I think hit uncomfortably close to home, and that's true. And there is anti-Semitism amongst the ranks of people who support Palestinian rights. And there's a difference between your motivation being supporting human rights and your motivation being finding something to criticize Jews about, right? Yeah. That's anti-Semitic, right? And then there is just a straight up Jews will not replace us as rampant anti-Semitism that cannot and should not be ignored. So I think that is like very much an aside from what we're talking about, but also would be treated as an aside by many leaders in the Black Lives Matter movement. Think about all the NBA players who have recently come out because of a totally different tradition that I don't really want to dive into regarding scripture and certain types of American Christianity, I think, and like a prevalent faith amongst many Black communities in America. There's a history of anti-Semitism amongst many people of Christian denomination, right? But I don't think that the issue of anti-Semitism and the danger posed to Jewish Americans by these white nationalists is an aside to Black Lives Matter. I think it's a direct correlation. And I routinely...
More of a reason why there should be more of a cohesive movement.
I meet multiple Jewish activists at every protest I go to in Providence. Like so many, particularly the white people that are involved in protests at a deep level.
And doing many of wild shit are usually
many
Jewish
of them are Jewish and are
because they've had to hear stories from their grandparents and they're over it. And that's why I feel a lot of them speak out against the occupied territories.
Dude, the guy that was on a couple weeks ago from the DSA, there's this horrible website called the Canary Mission that like tabulates mostly Palestinians and people of Jewish descent who are like really vocal pro-Palestine activists. Yeah. And they compile like this dude must have had 5,000 words written by him. The page was updated the day before I looked at it.
About him or by him?
About him. Like this guy is pro-Palestine and you need to destroy him. Like these are all the things he does that we don't agree with. Like just for individual human beings who are like grad students or activists, like that, they tabulate these people. So it's a really crazy thing.
It is.
That's a little looping back around. We've had a nice sort of meandering conversation tonight about graffiti, about the art scene in Providence, about some of the tensions between Providence's reputation as a creative capital, and sort of the positive and negative effects of the Rhode Island School of Design in the city. And I'm grateful for what I think is a great episode. Because
This was
Brother Muggs is really the brain behind any knowledge about art in the city.
Zane's happy to see my likeliness on the screen. That's really what it is. But I'm happy to be here. Happy to answer questions and talk to people about the arts anytime. It's an important part of who everyone is. It's an important part of who the city is. I can't speak for other parts of Rhode Island, but every element of hip hop lives here, and I love that. So.
Oh, last message, totally unrelated. It is not safe, in my opinion, for children to go back to school in person in like a month.
Yo, why is that even a discussion, bro? Like, most of the time people they'll be on Skypes, they'll be on these Zoom calls being like, oh, should kids go back to school? It's like, yo, if y'all are on Zoom calls about this, then it's probably not a good idea.
Right, and when they meet in person, they get COVID. It's absolutely ludicrous. My wonderful girlfriend, who is a key member of our studio entourage, has reminded, and as a school teacher, has reminded me that there is a driving rally to protest going back to school in person, sponsored by Safe Return to School RI, at Safe Return to School RI on Instagram. Driving in your cars, social distancing.
Honk your horn, make some noise. They're not going back. Never did I think as a kid that parents would be rallying to keep them home. You know what I mean? So take advantage of this, because it keeps our children safe, keeps our teachers safe, our bus drivers, our bus monitors, our janitors, everyone who's involved in education here in the city.
Right.
It shouldn't even be a question. This is crazy.
Speaking a bit presumptuously on behalf of my girlfriend, I think the teachers in a perfect world would prefer to be in school with the kids, right? Like, rather than distance. Like, it's not that, you see teachers kind of being gaslit about like, oh, they're being selfish or they're just protecting themselves. Like, when the truth is our society is designed so that you need to like scrape a living as an impoverished parent and rely on school as daycare rather than educational facility, which is fucked up. But the teachers in a perfect world would prefer to be back. But what I've heard from my significant other, from our 3 teacher guests on the show last week, right, from most every teacher that I've spoken to, is that it is
Antonia the week before.
Yeah, it's
also
not.
said,
Yeah, she's still in Chile, right? It's
Yes.
not safe to go back, and like they've had now the end of the previous semester and summer school. Now they're rolling into the first semester. Like they're going to get better at distance learning. The kids, the parents, the teachers. We were talking about art today, but that's something that is super important to me as well. I wanted to mention it. Rally on Monday, Safe Return to School RI.
Protect the youth.
On that note, this has been episode 7 of The Give and Take. Zane Wolfang. You're gonna say your name? No, Brother Muggs.
Brother Muggs in the building. See you later. Good night.